Good evening, friends. Let us be still for a moment. We are not gathered to get more light. We are here to notice the light that already is. There is a presence, one life, one love, that, when realized, shines through us without our trying. This is what happens when you truly understand why Jesus said, "Be the light of the world." Be is not a command to strive, it is the unveiling of what you are when fear grows quiet and the self-made effort rests. Many read those words as a burden to perform, but grace whispers otherwise, not by might, not by power, but by spirit realized. When this dawns, darkness is not argued with, it is simply outshone. We will turn tonight from explanation to realization, from trying to radiate to letting the light have its own way in us. And as that happens, watch what unfolds in your home, your work, your body, when illumination ceases to be a goal and becomes your native atmosphere. Will you sit so silently, just for these next breaths, that the light itself answers why those words were spoken for you here and now? If this resonates, like the video, comment the symbolic number 777 to say yes to the light. Subscribe for more contemplative teachings, because is identity realized, or not effort performed. We begin not by tightening our will, but by relaxing our grasp. The Master did not say, "Do the light," or "Try to shine." He pointed to what you are in God when the masks drop. Being is not an achievement, it is revelation. It is what dawns when you stop trying to become holy and start noticing the holy that is already the life of you. In that noticing, the strain leaves the soul. The shoulders soften. The breath returns to its natural rhythm. You find yourself present, simple, unpretending, and the quiet radiance that presence carries begins to disclose itself. Identity realized means you awaken from the small story of me to the larger I of spirit. Not another personality wearing a brighter smile, but the I am that precedes every role. When you rest as that, you are like a window freshly cleaned. Light passes because there is nothing in the way. The world calls this virtue, heaven calls it transparency, and transparency cannot be performed. You could imitate the gestures of kindness and still feel hollow, or you could let love stand up within you and discover that the gesture chooses itself. Notice how effort always begins from a premise of lack. I must get, earn, produce, persuade. Realization begins from fullness. I am in the light and the light in me. Effort says, I will light the room. Realization says, I will remove the shade. That is why silence matters. Not silence as a technique to twist God's arm, but silence as the atmosphere in which the truth of your being comes into view. In that hush, you do not become luminous. You discover you were luminous before you tried to be. This is why striving subtly strengthens the very sense of separation you want healed. The struggler believes it is apart from grace and must bridge the gap. But grace is the bridge discovering itself as you. When you consent to be what God is, being right where you are, the gap dissolves. Actions still happen, emails are written, children are fed, work is done, but they arise from center, not from strain. The fruit is the same motion of life that is your identity expressing itself naturally. Practice then becomes profoundly simple. Return often to the inner place where you are aware of awareness itself. Feel into the wordless I am. Let every thought about yourself fall like autumn leaves. Do not fight them, simply watch them drift and see what remains. It is not empty. It is alive, loving. Let it name you. Let it breathe you. Then move, speak, decide from that quiet floor. If you fall back into effort, do not scold yourself. Smile, pause, and return. Be is the end of pretending to be, the end of polishing an image, the end of bargain and bribe offered to the holy. It is the consent to reality, to the sun being the sun, to the lamp simply plugged into its source. In that consent, fear loosens, comparison thins, and the heart grows spacious enough to carry others without burden. And you begin to sense how the instruction to be the light is not a taskmaster, but a liberation into your truest name, and this liberation unveils that the light you are is presence. Personality is the bundle of habits, histories, preferences, and postures that the world learns to recognize as you. Presence is the living, aware I am that quietly remains when every posture relaxes. Personality is loud with self-description, presence is wordless knowing. Personality needs an audience, presence is whole in the dark. Personality asks to be admired, defended, improved, presence simply is, and in its being there is a soft radiance that needs no advertisement. When Jesus speaks of light, he is not speaking of charisma or charm. He is pointing to the unspectacular clarity of spirit that looks through your eyes when you stop performing. Think of a room. Furniture changes, colors change, but the space, unseen, holding all, does not change. Presence is that spaciousness. Personality is the furniture. The world takes its cues from furniture and misses the space. The spiritual life is learning to feel the space again, to trust it, to live from it. Confusing light with personality turns spiritual life into stagecraft. You try to seem kind instead of letting love move. You try to appear wise instead of listening. You manage impressions, and the soul grows tired. Presence does not manage, it witnesses. It listens so deeply that the next right gesture rises without strain. This is why moments of true presence feel effortless. You find yourself saying the healing word without rehearsing it, offering the needed silence without calculating it, drawing a boundary without bitterness. The action is simple because the source is simple. Presence is impersonal, but never cold. Impersonal means it is not captivated by the story of me and mine. It sees, includes, blesses, and remains free. Because it is free, it can love without possession, serve without self-importance, and stop without guilt. In presence, praise and blame pass like weather. They do not set your thermostat. There is a warmth here, but it is the warmth of the sun, not the heat of self-defense. How do you recognize it? Notice the interval before a thought is believed. Notice the silent witness that remains when a feeling surges and subsides. Sense the aliveness in your hands, the stillness behind your breath. Who is aware of all of this? Do not answer with a concept. Stay with the taste of awareness itself. That open, alert quiet is nearer to the light than any carefully crafted identity. Sit there often. Let your roles return when needed, but let them be like garments you wear lightly, not skin you cannot remove. In conversation, personality tries to persuade, presence receives and clarifies. At work, personality wants to win, presence wants to serve what is true and needed. In the body, personality resists discomfort and multiplies it. Presence allows sensation to come and go in the wider field of acceptance, and the nervous system remembers how to unclench. This shift is not dramatic. It is more like turning a dimmer from effort to ease, from commentary to contact. Charisma attracts attention, presence awakens attention. Charisma pulls people toward a person, presence opens them to themselves. One dazzles, the other frees. When you let the light be presence, you no longer try to stockpile moments of being impressive. You become available to the wisdom that appears unplanned, to the compassion that moves without self-congratulation, to the creativity that arrives when the mind stops gripping the pen. This is what the Master meant by, I of myself can do nothing. The I of personality yields, and the Father within, the indwelling life, does the seeing and the doing, not as a doctrine to repeat, but as a practical, felt shift of center. You begin to notice that when you are nobody in particular, love can be anybody it needs to be. You do not disappear, you are clarified. Your humor remains, or your quirks remain, but they are ornaments on a branch lit from within, the current steady, the glow quietly reliable, and as you let that current be primary, the movement of each day begins to carry a different quality, a subtler ease, an authority without strain, a readiness to stop or go, speak or be silent, turn left or right, without the nervous push of self-concern, without your pushing, you begin to feel a different propulsion beneath your steps. This is the hallmark of grace doing the work and self-effort coming to rest. The branch does not squeeze to bear fruit. The life in the vine expresses itself through it. When the center is grace, your doing is no longer an attempt to manufacture outcomes, but a willingness to cooperate with what is already moving. It is lighter, cleaner, lacking that metallic taste of anxiety. You find yourself guided more than driven, carried more than cramped. Grace is not a prize for good behavior. It is the activity of the living presence as your life. It is the quiet lawfulness of spirit unfolding its own idea in its own way, and our part is consent. Effort, when rooted in separation, tries to make something happen. Grace reveals what is already so. The light does not argue with darkness, it turns on. Your task is not to wrestle shadows, but to be plugged into the current, to stay available to the flow that is wiser than your plans. You will recognize grace by its signature rightness without strain. The word arrives that settles a room. The door that should not open opens without forcing. The timing you could not have scheduled orchestrates itself. Even interruptions serve. The mind accustomed to pushing will call this luck. The heart knows better. Not by might, nor by power, but by spirit. This does not excuse you from action. It purifies action of the fever to control and the fear of not being enough. Resting self-effort does not mean becoming passive or vague. It means laying down the belief that you are a separate doer who must secure life by constant gripping. It is the difference between rowing frantically and raising a sail. You still trim the line, read the sky, keep your hand on the tiller, but propulsion is received, not manufactured. In this posture, energy is conserved for what truly matters. Decisions clarify, boundaries firm without anger. Compassion flows without depletion because you are not paying the bill with personal reserves. How to enter this gracefulness is simple but not mechanical. Pause often, feel the ground under your feet. Let the breath remind you that life is breathing you. Inwardly yield. Here I am. Let the false responsibility to fix everything relax. Ask quietly, what would love do now? And wait a few honest seconds before the mind lunges to answer. Do not imitate yesterday's guidance. Grace is fresh. If no impulse comes, stay in benevolent stillness and take the next humble step already in front of you. Watch for the telltales that effort has taken the wheel again. Hurry in the chest, argument in the head, a dimming of gratitude. These are friendly bells. When they ring, stop, even for 3 breaths. Acknowledge the presence that is closer than your thoughts. Hand back the reins. You do the seeing here, you do the doing. Then proceed, unhurried on the inside. Even if the outer task asks for speed, you will discover that efficiency increases when urgency decreases, because confusion, not time, is what wastes life. Grace also reorganizes desire. What once felt necessary reveals itself as noise. What truly belongs to you begins to seek you. Resources, people, ideas arrive with a synchronicity that feels like a wink. Forgiveness that seemed impossible appears as a quiet willingness you can't trace back to effort. Even in pain, a subtle buoyancy holds you above the bottom. The light continues its work, and you learn to let your hands be its hands, your words its clarity, your schedule its servant, rather than your master. When your schedule becomes its servant, rather than your master, you also see that what you once called darkness does not require combat, it requires light. Darkness is not a force, it is a lack. You do not sweep night out of a room with a broom, you open the curtains. You do not rebuke a shadow, you turn toward the sun. This simple recognition ends a lifetime of wrestling with ghosts of fear, shame, and judgment as though they possessed substance. They borrow their seeming life from our attention and argument. Withdraw the argument, offer awareness. The atmosphere changes. Resist not evil is not permission for passivity, it is wisdom about how light functions. Resistance presumes a rival power. Outshining acknowledges one. When you rest in the fact of presence here, now, the nervous system receives a new instruction: stand still and see. The stillness is not a freeze, it is a lucid warmth that refuses to make an enemy of appearances. From that non-violence of heart, your words carry the color of peace. Your eyes see more than behavior, they see essence. The room feels it, and behaviors begin to forget their old momentum. This is practical. When a conflict erupts, personality wants to counterpunch or retreat. Presence pauses and lets the inner light come forward first. Sometimes it offers a single clear sentence. Sometimes it offers a silence that breaks the spell without explanation. When fear spikes in the body, the old habit is to fight the sensation, to add story upon sensation. Outshining means you feel the sensation inside a wider field of acceptance, and you let the light do the interpreting. Without your commentary, the surge crests and falls, and a space remains that is brighter than before. Treat darkness as a mistaken conclusion rather than a reality to be conquered. In thought, this sounds lofty. In practice, it becomes natural. You look at illness, scarcity, or estrangement and decline to grant them independent authority. You do not deny the facts, you deny their ultimacy. You turn toward the interior altar. Also, God is, not a spell, but a remembrance. And then you look again, and the next simple step appears. Perhaps a phone call is made. Perhaps a boundary is drawn. Perhaps you rest. The point is not the theatrics. The point is that action proceeds from illumination, not from panic. Notice the economy of light. One candle in a cave does more than 1,000 arguments against darkness. So it is with attention rooted in presence. Your quiet, one clenched awareness in a tense meeting becomes the candle. The tone shifts, options surface. Someone breathes for the first time all day. You did not win, you witnessed. The witnessing allowed what is true to emerge and organize the moment. This is why frantic fixing often multiplies confusion, while contact with the real simplifies without fanfare. Outshining is also humility. It frees you from the fantasy that you, as a separate doer, must defeat anything. You are not the source, you are the transparency. Let the source shine and discover how many so-called problems cannot survive exposure. Even habits long rehearsed begin to lose rehearsal space. They still knock, but the stage lights are up and their lines sound thin. You nod, you do not engage. You return to the radiance. Over time, the body learns this posture. The baseline agitation eases. Gratitude becomes frequent, not because you forced positives, but because the room is brighter and you can finally see what was always quietly good. At times the clouds seem thick, and you may be tempted to resort to struggle again. Let that be another cue to lean into the presence you have tasted. Remember the gentle law: whatever you face it as light from light in light. That remembrance is not a sentence you say, it is a quality of attention you are. And the swiftest way to become that attention is to return to the deep hush within, the inner sanctuary where lamps are trimmed and oil is replenished, where the very act of noticing becomes illumination, where silence itself begins to glow and make you transparent to the one from here. Silence is no longer the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness unencumbered. It is a lucid openness in which the mind's waves can rise and fall without obscuring the depth beneath. Outer quiet helps, but the true chamber is interior, a room without walls you can enter even in a crowded train. In that room, you stop pushing impressions around and they begin to settle of themselves. The sediment drops, the water clears, and what has always been shining at the bottom becomes visible again. This silence is not sleepy. It is alert, awake, tender. You can feel it in the softening of the jaw, the ungripping of the belly, the widening of the breath. You can feel it in the way attention gathers into a single, gentle beam instead of scattering into 100 anxious glances. You become less interested in commentary and more available to contact. The tree outside is simply green. The friend speaking is simply heard. The body aches, and you are simply kind to it. The simpleness is not dull, it is intimate. Transparency means that less of your personal past stands between presence and the moment. The glass of memory and opinion is wiped with the cloth of stillness. You do not abolish history, you empty it of glare. Then, like a window without smudges, you let what is beyond you be seen through you. People often call this authenticity, but it is more basic than that. It is the relinquishment of the need to be the source, so the source can be obvious. Practically, cultivate small sanctuaries of silence throughout the day. Before replying, 3 breaths. Before a meeting, 3 minutes. Upon waking, remain in bed for a handful of quiet heartbeats, noticing the awareness that was present even while you slept. Let your room, your car, your walk become monasteries without signage. The consistency matters more than the duration. Little pockets of stillness stitched together into a seamless garment you can wear anywhere. In prayer, shift from asking to attending. Not because asking is wrong, but because attending reveals that the answer precedes the question. Sit like a lake receiving sky. If a thought arrives, let it pass like a bird's reflection. If an emotion storms, let it ripple without trying to smooth it. Return again and again to the felt sense of being aware. Name it lightly. Here. This. I am. And then let even the names dissolve. Listen with your whole body. Feel the soles of your feet while you listen. Feel the breath at the nostrils while you listen. Let listening be larger than what is heard. When your attention is anchored in the body's simple aliveness, the mind has less fuel for rehearsals and rebuttals, and the silence stays intact even as conversation moves. Silence also clarifies speech. Words chosen from hush carry weight without force. They land. They don't need exclamation points. A no spoken from stillness is merciful. A yes spoken from stillness is trustworthy. In time, people feel safe around you, not because you are perfect, but because your presence is not crowded. Carry this hush into action. Wash with it. Answer emails with it. Let it guide the pace, the timing, the touch, until even noisy places become corridors of recognition. And as even noisy places become corridors of recognition, you begin to see life rearrange itself around this center. As consciousness awakens, your world reorders itself. The rearrangement is not a magic trick. It is coherence appearing where fragmentation once ruled. What you notice changes first. Old alarms do not command you as they did. Your attention, no longer scattered, gathers itself, and whatever receives steady, loving attention begins to harmonize. Priorities shift without the drama of self-reform. What was once urgent reveals itself as unimportant. What was once postponed as not profitable returns with a quiet authority. Rest, prayer, a walk, a hard conversation, the craft you abandoned because it wasn't efficient enough. Time itself feels different. Hours used to be a small container you tried to overfill. Now they are a wide river you learn to navigate. Chronos yields to kairos. Rightness of timing more than volume of doing. Relationships edit themselves. Some companions whose bond was built on complaint or competition gently move to the background, not because you reject them, but because your resonance changes. Others, drawn by the same interior tone, arrive seemingly out of nowhere. The conversations become cleaner. Boundaries clarify without hostility. You find yourself telling the truth sooner and with less apology, and the truth, spoken in love, reduces the need for later repairs. Work redefines itself from ambition to assignment. You do not shrink, you align. The question shifts from, how do I get ahead, to what is mine to serve? In that shift, resources repattern. Opportunities that once hid because your grasping scared them off begin to knock. Some projects close naturally. You release them with thanks. Others expand beyond your prior capacity. Grace provides the capacity as you go. Productivity becomes fruitfulness, less churn, more impact. Fewer scorch marks on the soul. The body follows suit. As fight and flight loosen their constant grip, sleep deepens, digestion steadies, breath widens. Pains that were amplified by fear soften when wrapped in attention. You become more sensitive, yes, but not more fragile. Sensitivity becomes intelligence. You notice what nourishes and what agitates, and you choose accordingly without self-punishment. Movement is less about conquest and more about communion. Walking, stretching, or lifting as a way of listening to the temple entrusted to you, even your physical spaces tell the story. Drawers get simpler. Desks clear. You keep what serves and bless what leaves. Beauty, not extravagance, becomes a quiet standard. Light order, a plant, a chair that invites prayer. Your environment no longer mirrors your hurry, it mirrors your hush. Guests comment without knowing why. It feels easy here. The ease is not decorator's skill. It is inner weather finding outer form money two unknots. It stops being a savior or an enemy and becomes a servant. Scarcity narratives lose their authority as you witness provision meeting purpose in ways your calculating could not engineer. You still budget, you still plan, but fear is not the author of those plans. Generosity becomes practical wisdom, not performance. You give where you are sent, not where guilt shouts the loudest. And often, what you give circulates and returns as supplies suited to the next yes. Challenges do not disappear, they reframe. Storms still blow, but the sailor in you has learned to feel the wind rather than curse it. What you once labeled setback is more often revealed as redirection. What looked like closed doors turn out to be walls you no longer need to climb because the path has curved. You take fewer detours into self-accusation, where repentance becomes quick, repair becomes normal, and shame loses its stickiness in the light of simple honesty. Language refines. Fewer words, more accuracy. Promises shrink to fit truth, and trust grows because reality replaces performance. Your yes becomes a clear corridor. Your no becomes a gentle boundary that protects love. You notice that authority has quietly appeared. Not authority over others, but authority within yourself. A settledness that lets you move through the day without constantly negotiating with fear. This reordering is contagious. Families feel it. Teams feel it. Or neighborhoods feel it. Not because you campaign, but because coherence invites coherence. You become a tuning fork. Those around you remember their pitch. The light, having taken its rightful place at the center, organizes orbit and rhythm, clarifies seasons of sowing and reaping, restores proportion, turns burdens into assignments and assignments into joy, and the next step, when it presents itself, meets a readiness in you that did not exist before.